So in the previous lesson, looking at the study of the British Empire for AQA A-level history, we spent some time talking about the role of David Livingstone as an imperial explorer and somebody who, of course, contributed greatly to a number of intellectual ideas associated with the British Empire. This lesson is going to follow this kind of rationale by focusing on John Kirk and the role that John Kirk plays in East Africa, particularly Zanzibar, as a British physician and a naturalist as well as a diplomat in East Africa. So we can see that a number of his contributions are closely associated with some of the work of David Livingstone. Things like scientific research as well as anti-slavery efforts as well. And so what we will do is spend some time talking about his time in his Zambezi expedition, his diplomatic service in Zanzibar, a number of scientific contributions he had made, and then thinking about his legacy as part of the British Empire. So something that you probably don't need to know that much about is, of course, his early life, but let's just very quickly go over it. He was born in 1832 in Barry, Scotland, and he studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh. He also would serve as a physician during the Crimean War, but it is then after this time period, after these things that take place, that we get to the thing that's important for us as students of the British Empire, which is, of course, the fact that he would then later join David Livingstone's Zambezi expedition in 1858 as a physician and a naturalist. Kirk accompanied Livingstone then. He accompanied Livingstone in most of his African journeys, including being among the first Europeans to, in fact, see Lake Nysa in 1859. He also had a number of skills when it came to photography and things like the providing of visual documentation of the expeditions through various different sketches. This is obviously very important because it obviously ties into his work as a naturalist, his work as a physician, and his work in discovery of a number of scientific contributions, for example. Between 1866 and 1887, we see that Kirk was appointed acting surgeon to the British political agency in Zanzibar. He quickly rose through the ranks and would become the vice consul in 1866, assistant political agent, in 1868, and then he would eventually become consul general in 1873 and political agent in 1880. During his tenure during this period as in diplomatic service in Zanzibar, he became a key advisor to the Sultan Burgash of Zanzibar. Kirk's notable achievement in this regard, then, was his instrumental role in the abolition of the East Africa slave trade. Just like David Livingstone, he was a staunch abolitionist in terms of the contributions to slavery. In 1873, he successfully negotiated a treaty with the Sultan to end the slave trade in Zanzibar, which of course is an important and quite significant step in the history of the region. But more importantly, not necessarily more importantly for Zanzibar, but more broadly speaking, should I say, he made a number of important scientific contributions. He made a number of significant contributions to understanding East African flora and fauna. He introduced several plant species to European horticulture, including, for example, the Impatiens wallinaria, which was known as the busy lizzie, the plant. He also worked on economic potential for East African plants, such as the rubber-producing species of copal resin, and laid the groundwork for future agricultural development in the region. So he wasn't just somebody who made scientific contributions that would ultimately be beneficial to nobody except for people who are interested in plants in Britain, for example. But he also made a number of contributions through the discovery of plants in East African parts of East Africa in Zanzibar, to uncovering and to understanding the potential economic benefits of these plants. That's another part that is important. So rubber producing species and copal resin, for example, would be very, very important given the fact that rubber producing species will benefit through the production of rubber, which would then benefit the British Empire more broadly from an economic perspective. After his retirement from his consular post in 1887, Kirk would continue to influence East African affairs. He served as the plenipotentiary at the Brussels Conference on the African slave trade, and he did so from 1899 to 1890. And was also involved in the establishment of the British East Africa through the support of the Imperial British East African Company. He would also contribute to the planning of the Uganda Railway, and so his legacy is pretty multifaceted if you were to try and define it in one way or another. On the one hand, he is important for his scientific contributions for the discovery of various different plants and flora and fauna, which of course benefited European horticulture, but also benefited the economic potential of these East African plants. He played a very key role in terms of his diplomatic service in Zanzibar, especially when it came to his contributions to abolishing the East African slave trade. And then in his later years, he would continue his work when thinking about the abolition of the slave trade by working with the Brussels Conference in 1889 to 1890. And then a final point is that he contributed, of course, to the planning and the construction of the Uganda Railway.